Welcome to Positive Disintegration, a path to authenticity. Today we're joined by guest Sarabeth Berk Bickerton, talking about identity in the workplace. We're going to explore how people can define and hone in on their authentic self within the context of a workplace and help them discover their authentic identity, much like we would do when discovering our authentic selves through positive disintegration. So stick around, because whether you're looking to define yourself as who you ought to be or get some clarity on who you are in your career, I think you'll find this conversation interesting. Hello, wonderful listeners, and welcome to Positive Disintegration. I'm Emma Nicholson.
I'm Dr. Chris Wells.
And Chris, today we're going to be talking about identity in the workplace.
Yes, I'm very excited for this conversation.
Me too. I'm finding the topic quite intriguing, being one of these people who I find really hard to define my own role. So I'm hoping to learn something out of this one.
I feel sure that you will. And me too. We'll all learn something.
I'm sure everybody will. So for our listeners, our guest today is Dr. Sarabeth Berk Bickerton. Sarabeth is a professional identity researcher and the leading expert on hybrid professional identity. She was featured in Forbes, is a TEDx speaker, and is the author of More Than My Title, The Power of Hybrid Professionals in a Workplace of Experts and Generalists. She helps professionals, many of them gifted adults, to discover and articulate their professional identity and unique value in the workplace. Welcome to the podcast, Sarabeth.
I am over the moon to be here. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. I'm happy to give a shout out to the person who brought us together, who is Nadia from Gifted Unleashed now. But I was on her podcast in October 2021, and that's when we met that fall.
Yes. I was a listener, and I was so taken with the conversation you had with Nadia that I had to reach out. So that was the initial step.
I'm so glad you did. And then you submitted a presentation for the Congress in 2022. Well, you went to the University of Denver for your doctorate. So I'm going to ask you how you first discovered Dabrowski's theory. And I just want to predict that maybe it was then.
You hit the nail on the head, Chris. Yes, we are swimming in similar circles. It just took me a long time to find you and find some of the other people that are connected in this group. But I was studying my doctorate in curriculum instruction from, I think, 2012-ish through 2015. And I kept taking gifted and creativity courses. And Dr. Norma Haffenstein was my professor for most of those. And I just fell in love with the content, everything she showed us and had us read. And at one point, she brought up Dabrowski. And that was the first time I saw the theory of positive disintegration. And I remember being so taken with it. But also, we didn't get a full view. I mean, I know this podcast is dedicated to going to the depths and the corners and the crannies of how rich and wide it is. But I got the cursory sort of 101, and I thought, wow, maybe I've gone through a disintegration. Like, I didn't even realize you could go through multiple, but I was like, maybe I've gone through one in my life. And that's all that landed at the time. And it turns out it made such an impression on me back in grad school that maybe 2 years later, I was going through a hard work moment, and it just kind of clicked back in my brain. Oh my God, I think I'm going through a positive disintegration in this moment. And then I was ravenous for more literature. I was like, how do I know? And who do I talk to? And am I crazy? And how do you get out of a disintegration? Like, the questions just kept spinning. So I've been sort of a light but very curious academic of this topic. And I'm so glad you have the podcast, because I feel like I'm finally getting the resources I've been craving.
That's so nice to hear. But I mean, all of that was nice to hear, honestly, because I love how Norma brings the theory to her students. And when you think about her doing this year after year with new students, it's really cool, I think, to imagine how many people have been exposed to Dabrowski's theory thanks to Norma.
Yeah, that's incredible. She really helps get the word out.
She does. I wish more schools had dedicated professors Dedicated meaning they care about the theory and they are introducing it to new groups of students every year. I hope that we reach that point someday.
I think you will. I think you're bringing this mainstream, which I really feel is the vision of all the work you're doing with the center and the Congress and the podcast. It's more available and accessible, and you're making the content relevant again. So I think you're on your way.
I hope so.
Thanks. It is what we're trying to do because, as you sort of alluded to, it's not just a thing that you learn about and say, oh, that's fascinating from an intellectual perspective. The magic of it is when you go, oh, that's me.
It's true. Well, let's talk about your work. Your work is very interesting, and I say that as somebody who feels like I am a hybrid professional where I have a bunch of different identities that I've brought together to create something new from them.
I think the best way to open is to say, how do you or anyone you encounter answer the what do you do question? That question has plagued me. And I had a lot of anxiety through the years because my question or that my answer to that question has changed as I've grown in my work and my interests and my career. I'm always like, yeah, who am I now? What do I do? How do I describe this? And what I realized is the what do you do question is really a who are you? We're not interested in the things you're doing in the work, but we're interested in getting to know, like, how do you see yourself? What do you call yourself? And I have started describing that as your professional identity. Your professional identity is how you see yourself in your work besides your job title. And most of us don't know this. We don't know we even have a professional identity because we're so accustomed to just introducing ourselves with, I'm a director of sales, I'm a head of programs, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a coach. We use really general language, which doesn't differentiate us. So the way I really got started, if I back up, when I was working on my dissertation and I was in my PhD program, I didn't know what I wanted to do next. Like typically you're going to go on and become an academic and a professor. And I was like, I don't want that path for myself. I don't know what I'm doing next in the world. And when people would say, well, what do you want to be? I'd freeze. And I just felt really on tilt and on edge of like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then eventually I was actually in some critical race theory classes and learning about intersectionality and starting to unpack that we have these different sides of ourselves and we can have multiple identities. And identity is a huge topic with race and class and gender and religion and ability, and it goes on and on. And I started realizing, wait, just in the part of my life that's my professional self, I have multiple professional identities. Before grad school, I'd been an artist and an educator, and then I was becoming a researcher and I loved design. So I was a designer and I was accumulating these identities and felt like I could only be one at a time because that's how the work world would hire me. They would only understand who I was as one thing, but really I was everything. And so one day I was working on some research and realized this question, which was who am I at the intersection of my multiple professional identities? So I was borrowing the concept of intersectionality, but just putting it into my work life. And that question has stayed with me now for a decade because I think it is this burning question. I would say millions of workers are also feeling stuck on and struggling with because they love to do many things too. We have a lot of language out there in the workforce of being a multi-potentialite, a multi-hyphenate, a generalist, a jack of all trades, um, a gig worker, a free agent, like people that can just wear a lot of hats are in this multiplicity side of their professional life. And they struggle to be known for something and to define themselves and to choose one thing because they're not. And so that's where my research came in. And to make it really simple, I think there are three types of professional identity in the workforce. And that includes the first type of singularity, which means someone just has one professional identity. If you ask them what they do, they're like, I'm just a scientist. Like, I love doing science. The next bucket is multiplicity. Those are for the people that wear a lot of hats and they do a lot of things. They have multiple interests. And the third bucket is hybridity. If you think about a Venn diagram, the circles start to overlap and there's an intersection between the different hats you wear. In fact, there's a whole new interconnected thing that comes out in the middle of the Venn diagram. And that's the beauty of the hybrid is it defies categorization. We can't name it because it's a combination of things that we didn't know could exist together. And I was like, that's the third part of the workforce that's been missing. That's how I feel I am in my work. I have this hybrid professional identity. And when I came up with that conclusion, my whole world opened up. I had a new way to frame myself, to realize why I had this blended set of diverse professional identities. And it helped me know how to name and describe my value and the value add that I bring to the work world. So, from all of that research, I wrote a book about this. And then people started coming to me for coaching and guidance and speaking. And suddenly there's, like thought leadership and blogs and other things happening that I never expected would transpire. But it has resonated so far and wide that people needed a new construct and process as well as empowerment to believe they can have this integrated or hybrid way of being in the world. And my work gives them permission and tools to be that. So that's kind of the overview of what I've been up to.
It's so relatable to have that issue of anxiety or like at a loss when people say, "What do you do?" I, until recently, just absolutely dreaded the question of, "What do you do?" Because how to explain to people what I do? I study this obscure theory, and before I had the podcast, mostly I was toiling in obscurity, doing my work, trying to figure out how to get paid for it. What was I going to do? And yet, like, I had all of these identities that came together from other things I've done. I'm a social worker, uh, you know, I'm a writer. And so, like, I never knew how to answer that question, and I've had so many brutal conversations, like, over the holidays and things like that, trying to explain, and so when I was first exposed to your work, I thought, "I love this hybrid professional identity," that, like, to me, it resonated so much, and so I'm glad that you're here having this conversation, and I wonder what Emma thinks, because, I mean, Emma always talks about herself, like, as a business analyst, but what's your professional identity, Emma?
That's an interesting question because when you say business analyst, it's such a nebulous, far-reaching title anyway. It's almost like a jack of all trades bucket, particularly in project management that you just say, yeah, I'm a business analyst, and still nobody knows what it is that you do because it could mean so many things. But funny enough, when I went to your website, Sarabeth, and stalked you out, it made a lot of sense to me how that hybrid thing works, and I could almost see myself in it. But I think that's only because I put a lot of thought into the question of who am I through all the other work that I've been doing, working on myself, learning about the theory. And I'd already gone through steps of figuring out what are my values, who is it that I want to be as a person. So it made it a little bit easier for me to make sense of that. But still, when I describe what it is that I do, like, I try to use some of the language because for me, most of it comes back to being helpful, helping others succeed at stuff. That is really who I am as a professional, even with my content creation. But I know that only because I've done all that extraneously hard work leading up to this point. Because even when I say, oh, I'm a problem solver, I do training, I curate guidance, I like to map out processes. The driving force between all of those that keeps me motivated is helping other people do their stuff. I train people because I want them to grow and I want to help them. I create content because I want to help other people find themselves. And even with things like problem solving, it's like, well, why do I solve problems? Is it because I like the intellectual exercise? No, I want to help people get their problems. So for me, it does make a heap of sense, but I know how difficult that can be to sort of explain, like, who are you? What motivates you if you haven't done all the groundwork? So I think, you helping people articulate that is really important because particularly if people are going between careers and that, they need to know what's going to motivate them, like what's going to drive them when they land. Like, they might be thinking about a new sideways move over here, but when they land on the other side of the fence, like, is it going to drive them? Are they going to stay there? What reasons are they there? So for me, like, to be honest, the only people who really ask me what it is that I do are people in my workplace. So I generally go down to role specifics because that's what they're asking about. That's what they want to know. But it's interesting that it can be difficult to think about who you are if you haven't sat down and done all the work behind it. And like I saw on your website, you had a heap of worksheets and that to help people work through it. It's like, yeah, it's not easy to get to that point to be able to articulate it.
It's so true. That's one of the biggest discoveries I've seen in helping people is this lack of self-awareness. Even if people think they're self-aware, the meta-awareness it takes of getting outside of yourself and seeing yourself outside of who you think you are and having metacognition is extraordinarily hard. And that's a lot of where I spend time with my clients is having them tell stories about what they do, because I've realized a lot of us share common skills. Everybody on this call could probably say, I solve problems, I love to help people, I build relationships. There's a lot of common language that's out there about jobs and skills. But the way you solve problems versus I solve problems, and Chris, like all of you, we do it differently, but we don't know that unique way we do it. And we don't understand the different identities we're bringing when we solve these problems. And so that's another level of awareness. So I slow people down and I start kind of with that skill space of tell me a moment when you're at your best and things are really flowing and you lose track of time. What exactly are you doing? And then we look at who are you in that moment when you're doing that thing? And then we start to see other themes emerge and really interesting language starts to come through. Like this one gentleman was like, well, I'm a project manager, but I also was a researcher and I study political science and I just move pieces around like it's a chessboard and I can help balance the tension between different systems. And eventually we found out he was a tension methodologist. Like a whole new version of him came through because we really had time to hear who he was in a way he could have never spoken about himself. So sifting through that and making sense through the themes and the bigger ideas of what we're doing when we do what we do is the power of uncovering our professional identity, especially for people who are hybrid. And language, is about categorization and compartmentalization and making meaning when we're talking about abstract things. Like being hybrid is about defying anything that's standard.
Defying anything that's standard sounds like the path to authenticity to me. I feel like I have had to create my own path. And right now in my mind, I just have the image of placing like step after step after step, just like cobbling together what I'm doing. And yet, like, it never occurred to me I was going to have to do that. When I was young, even 10 years ago, I assumed there was going to be some position that I could move into and do work. And like you, I had to go through I'm getting a PhD. Am I going to become a professor? Do I want to be an academic? And by the time I was done, I thought, no, I mean, I don't want to be an academic. That's not for me. I'm just not built for doing what I'm told and working in that kind of a system. I know that about myself. And so my path to authenticity, I think, when it comes to work it's felt really difficult. But now that I've figured it out to a certain degree, I realized that I had to create the Dabrowski Center. I think that was one of the key things, and the podcast, like finding my voice literally and being willing to put myself out there and be known by people was a lot. But to me, this hybrid professional identity is a really authentic, difficult path that may be more related to multi-level disintegration than the other two. Not that the other two are necessarily unilevel instead, but this hybrid one, because of the intersection of identities and the fact that you are now creating something new from them, just seems to me more relevant for our positive disintegration conversation. But what do you think about that? Like about the disintegration factor of career?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel my next book, the one I'm working on right now, is about this idea of what is career, and I'm using the language of career belonging instead of career fit, because fit is about fitting in, where belonging is about being accepted for who you are. I think we've got some big like semantics to shift and change just in how we've been saying that for so long, like find your career fit. No. And so personally, I've struggled to figure out where I fit in the workforce and who I am and what I do and what career is right for me because truthfully, I don't have any traditional way of being. I love doing too many things. And I think from the Dabrowski point of view, and what I've heard you both mention on podcasts so often is figuring out, like Emma was saying, who you are and what you value and going through these dark nights of the soul and really going deep into yourself to break it all apart and then put it back together. And I know that's what I've been doing from a professional lens is helping people really stop and question, how are you in the world? How do you see yourself? How do other people see you? And I've got frameworks around this. And then we break people into multiple identities. I have them brainstorm 50 different professional identities just to start making a map and a landscape before we can put them back together and see the bigger picture and take them to that next level of consciousness, which I think you're right. I think it has to do with authenticity as well as their uniqueness. It's really hard to name what makes someone unique. Like if you ask that as a question directly, Emma, why are you unique? And before you answer that, what I've seen is most people don't have a good answer. Like they come up with like, oh, my superpower is this, or I'm really good at like helping people work on businesses. But that's still kind of a bland response. And so I've erased that word unique when I work with people to say, tell me where you're the first, best, or only. Like I use different criteria and questions that I've found get more to who they are than the traditional way. It's like we have to side skirt our own psyche to get out of our own way. And then it's hidden inside of us. And my job is to help that just break through.
We do have to get out of our own way. I believe that so strongly. And there are so many protections in our own minds that keep us from seeing reality clearly about ourselves, especially. It's not easy to see yourself and know yourself and to especially to articulate who you are. So I'm sure that it's such a gift to work with you and to figure this out for your clients. And what are your clients like? Like who's coming to you for help and for coaching and to figure out their identity?
Yeah, at first I would have answered and said they're people in career transition. And I've worked with people in their late 20s through probably late 50s. So all different stages and ages. But the more people that have come to me over time, I do think they're gifted. I think that the language I hear about how they're systems thinkers and they love complexity and they're good pattern recognizers and just kind of these key words of they can see multiple horizons and timelines and connect dots that nobody else can. I'm like, okay, that's a higher order than the traditional person. And there's a reason they are working with me because they can feel this need, this like existential, like inner work of they want to know themselves in a way that they haven't been able to figure it out. And traditional career counseling and advice and other life coaching doesn't get to the special thing that I've put together. So I have noticed, I think there's a bend to people that are really trying to reinvent themselves and want to have a deeper awakening and understanding of who they are. And they tend to be on the gifted spectrum.
For me, listening to you say all this, I see two big overlaps with the theory of positive disintegration. First of all, because what you're basically doing is walking people through a process of autopsychotherapy, almost like for their career, and it's to get to the question of who am I, which is what we're all burning to know, right? Really, that's what resonates with people about the theory itself, because it's like you need to figure out who you are. And as you were alluding to before, like with that whole career fit mentality, like when people are searching for, well, what it is that I want to do with my life, the standard approach is, here's the wall of pigeonholes. Select one and figure out which one makes you the least uncomfortable. And so you're also nailing down almost to that, hey, you're not broken. There's something about the authentic you, which is beautiful and unique. Let's not think about the wall of pigeonholes, and let's not think about being integrated anymore. Let's think about smashing that wide open and making the best use of you as a human being. So I really like that approach because it's what we need. And even when we go through personal disintegrations, you turn back up at work and then shit, I'm still in the fucking machine, right? I'm still a cog, I'm still a brick in the wall, and I think that's particularly for maybe gifted people who have even started doing the work on themselves, like personally, to be hit with that wall of pigeonholes again, it's just got to be so disheartening, I guess.
Oh my gosh, I love this wall of pigeonholes. I am so borrowing that. I have this mental image of that. That was terrific, Emma. You're making me think of a story, if I can share this quickly, of a gentleman who found my work. He's overseas in the UK, and he just found such profound support by understanding this idea of intersection within his identity. So essentially, the company he was in got acquired. And so this merger was happening and they were restructuring everybody, right? And they're trying to figure out what departments to put people in and what new titles everyone gets assigned. And this gentleman's name is Simon. And I can't remember exactly what he did. It was like client services. But of course, he was more than his title. And he was already feeling kind of beat down in the role and stuck. And he didn't know if he was going to stay. And he was just kind of hanging on to see where the restructure would land him. And so the company is going around kind of interviewing people, trying to understand who does what. And sure enough, one person from this department and someone else from that department, they would reference, oh, well, the person who supports us on this is Simon. And they're like, okay, that's interesting. Simon must help on this team. But then the different person was like, oh no, Simon knows the answers to this. And they're like, wait, Simon helps you too? And like these roads kept leading back to Simon. Like Simon was the go-to person from many different angles within the company. And they're like, what do we do with this guy, Simon? And they give him a new assignment and he goes, no, 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 I'm not going to accept that. Like this, what you've given me doesn't match me. And they're like, okay, let us try again. And they come back and like they just couldn't figure out where to put him. And that's about the time when Simon found my work and he realized he needed to draw a Venn diagram and come up with his own labels of how he saw himself and what the bodies of his work really were. And it was something like technical and creative direction and client supports and stakeholder engagement. And then he set a meeting with like the HR staff and his manager and some other people in the company and said, I want to talk to you about my role. And I think I have a way to show you who I am. And so he put up a PowerPoint slide with his Venn diagram. And then he did his introduction. I have sort of a Mad Lib of, tell people you work at the intersection of A, B, and C. And so he did his elevator pitch and he said it helped them just get me. They had such robust conversation. They were able to see why he was such a valuable team member because he connected these things that they didn't understand. And the visual plus his message plus his own explanation of himself helped him kind of navigate and negotiate where he belonged in the company. So it's pretty substantial when these pieces click together, how much communication it can support and both make you feel like you belong and wherever you're working then understand you better too.
I think there's a bit of a mindset shift that needs to happen from like a employer corporate level because the way work is normally structured for people, it's like, here's a role, here's a set of tasks. And everything that they think about of like, we need someone with X skill set to do Y job. And if you're going to progress to do anything else, it's normally based on the things that you've done, like the tasks, the technical skills that you've got, and far less about what is the unique thing that that person brings into that role. And that's very much the thing for like most jobs that are pretty like standard and rigid in what it is they do. So like, if you're a barista, you make coffee. Right? And it doesn't matter what other things that you can bring to that role, whether it's not the fact that you make all your customers smile or, you lift up your fellow employees or any of that other stuff. It's about what it is that you're doing. You make coffee. And even in roles like mine, we still go about it this way. It's like we've got 5 or 6 things that we need to deliver this year. The work's going to be broken down into various tasks. Who's the best person to do those tasks based on their current skill set? And none of this is thinking about like, the value that the person brings, perhaps in their attitudes or what they value or how they interact with people around or what drives them as a person. And it's got to be difficult for people, particularly if they are gifted and they can do a lot of things or wear a lot of hats, because it's just like, oh, we have a hat, your head will fit in it. Just get in there and wear the hat for a while, And I think employers, when they're thinking about things from the pigeonhole perspective of task needs to be done, they're missing a bit of a trick by saying, rather than saying, we've got these individuals, these unique people, how can we change the work or the way that we work to make best use of people? But that's not, it's like we take the people and cram them into the work rather than getting the work and fitting it to the people.
That's really well said. There's so many thoughts going through my head right now. I want to work with more companies and do exercises with them. Like, imagine you're in a room with your team and you learn that some people in this room have singularity as the way they see themselves, and some are in multiplicity and some are in hybridity. And everybody in that room can raise their hand and say, no, I am just one thing. And other people are like, no, I'm the many and I'm the hybrid. It changes the dynamic of how those people then interact and understand each other and understand how they want to be seen, known, and acknowledged in the company and by managers. And I have a theory that every company needs a different ratio and proportion of singularity, multiplicity, hybridity, because you don't want everyone to just be in one. It would be too unbalanced. And not everyone is a hybrid too. I get that question a lot. Well, I'm a hybrid. Isn't everybody a hybrid? And truthfully, it's like saying everybody's an expert. There's different fits and different types that fit the individuals for a lot of reasons. Not everyone can be in one or the other. Hybrids, by the way, can move into multiplicity and singularity. They don't always have to stay there, but their preference, like where they feel their best and where their highest value is when they're in the hybridity. But of course, you can say just use one identity at a time if there's a certain project or need. But imagine if your team that you're working with understood each other's professional identities and different types, and then how that would help you do the work and perform and understand why Marcia over here is working across departments and Sam over here just wants to stay in one lane. People then suddenly are working at the level and in the means that they feel they can flourish. And the last thing I'll say here is I've found that hybrids in companies tend to be those people that are silo busters and boundary crossers. They have this natural tendency and aptitude to want to work across disciplines that really don't belong to them or seem outside of their work, but they have a natural sense of realizing, no, there's a connection here and I need to make it because it's going to help our team do something better. And they see those connections other people are missing. And that's why every team or company needs hybrids in the right seats. So there's a lot of, I think, performance management as well as engagement and retention that happens when we understand professional identity better.
And I think, to your point, with some things and ways of working like suit people better, depending on the view of that from the person who employs you, it can be seen as a positive or negative either way. Like, some managers like someone who just puts their head down, bum up, stay in your lane, do your thing. Don't be over at so-and-so's desk looking at what they're doing. Concentrate on what you're doing in front of you. Like, they don't like that hybrid way of thinking. Whereas in other places, you say, oh, why aren't you curious? Like, that they think that maybe people who stay in their lane are lazy or not ambitious. So depending on how that's perceived as well can make a big difference to people's mental health. So I think that you working with companies to explain even simple things like workplaces grasping the difference between introversion and extroversion and that you need a bit of both to make it work, and leverage the strengths. I think this is a strength-based approach that you're taking, and working with employers is really important because it will help them view their unique individuals from a strength-based approach.
I couldn't agree more. It's the both and. Right now, my work is definitely focused more on individuals and helping them feel like they're seen, known, and valued, especially if they're trying to navigate the waters of career change. but I am working more towards helping employers and managers and people that are doing hiring to understand the power of professional identity within their workforce and their units. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think there are some early adopter companies who are on that leading edge and they understand we can't just hire people to be in one box anymore. We have to allow them to feel like they have growth and latitude to be who they are. But they don't know how to do that exactly. And that's where I want my tools to be more utilized and more widely known. Because imagine if you're at an interview and instead of the question, tell me about yourself, they said, tell us what your professional identity is. How do you see yourself in your work? And even the loose language of are you in singularity and multiplicity hybridity starts to become a common lens. And then you can be talking openly with them of, well, I have this identity and this identity and this identity that I bring to this work, and here's why. And I'm a person who works at the intersection of them. And that helps me develop this kind of strategy, which is really necessary in this role. Like it's a really robust way to talk about your past experience and especially your diversity of experience, as opposed to, I can do job A, I can fit your box, like you were saying. And the last thing I want to mention here too is there is a proliferation of new degrees out there in a lot of universities that are integrated majors. And so we've got this new kind of disconnect between students, especially Gen Z, are trying to have these almost hybrid degrees when they graduate. MIT has one that's like design, business, and maybe engineering. I've talked about that program. Carnegie Mellon has one. And then they say when these students graduate, they don't know where to fit in the work world because industry doesn't recognize what this degree is. They're like, you have an integrated interdisciplinary degree. Like, where do you fit? So when the employers are looking for fit and the students want to be more integrated, like, what are we doing?
Listening to you both, I feel like I watched my professional life like unfold before my eyes. And it's really interesting to me to think about like the struggles that I've had in every position that I've ever been in that I didn't create myself. And it's like, what's important to me? Relationships are important to me. So I have to care about the people I work with, like them to some extent. And I have to feel some reciprocity and caring. Like, again, relationships, like probably the most important thing. Then the other thing that I feel like has been so hard at every job I've ever had is the fact that I'm the kind of person who wants to do things better. I want to improve on the way things are done. I see all the flaws in what we're doing and I want to improve them. That is not, I've found, what people actually want. They want me to shut up and do what I'm told and to not talk about what we could be doing better. And like those two things have been really difficult for me in almost every job I've had. And yet, like the other thing I was thinking of while listening to you is that that's how I met my husband, because we met in 2000 around this time. It was spring, and it was a call center. I was doing tech support for AT&T WorldNet, and he was like in client services. And so we got to know each other because he would have, like, I did chat tech support, which was brand new at the time, and he was in charge of chat. And so, I don't know, I just felt a connection with Jason. And so the first email I ever sent him was like, hey, Jason, I think that chat, like, it's going pretty well, but here's my take on our team, and here's some things I think that could be better. And when he got that message, he was like, no one ever writes to me, like, with their thoughts about what could be better. Like, he was like the one person in any job I've ever had who valued the fact that I had some vision for how things could be and was willing to, like, be a part of that process. And like, I didn't end up working there for much longer because like we were dating before. Yeah, like we just couldn't keep working together while we were dating. And so I quit. But it's just interesting to me that like that connection with Jason came from his like receptivity to my ideas, where that just has not been the case at other places where I've worked.
All the different hats we've worn in our lifetime and all these jobs we've accumulated. And then I start to think about how you see yourself, and you're so much more than that role at that time, but it just takes a while for all of it to come through. I find that people who are hybrid tend to be in roles where they are constricted and they have to diminish parts of themselves, and they start to burn out and feel disengaged because nobody's asking them for that additional, like, give us feedback, or what else can you bring to the table? They're like, just stay in your lane. And so eventually they have to leave the role or create something for themselves or find a manager who gets them or advocate for themselves. Like they have to work the situation out. And I'm very similar to you, Chris. I've been pigeonholed enough times, and then I've only held my jobs like maybe 3 years at the most. Like I go through jobs pretty quickly because I don't feel like I can fully be me. And it's taken me this long to even recognize, what do I need in a job? Like, how do I showcase my multiple professional identities? And I've come to the core truth that I'm a creative disruptor. Like, that is how I name my hybridity, because I disrupt everywhere we go. I'm like you, I question things. I want to change stuff. I have new ideas. My creativity comes in. And oftentimes disruption can be, a problem, and it's causing too much chaos. And that's why I say I'm a creative disruptor, because I'm doing it for good. I'm doing it with an intention of trying to alleviate and solve and bring new life to things. But which companies and which roles are really positioned for a creative disruptor? And when I get in the role, like, people might say, yes, that's what we need. And then I get in it and they're like, wait a minute, this is a little more than we bargained for. And I'm still on that journey of trying to understand, which is why I'm stuck on this new question of, where do I fit? It's the natural extension of my first book. I've learned I'm so good at helping people figure out who they are, that the follow-on question is, well, now where do I go? Where do I fit or belong? And I was like, yeah, I need to research that, because there's something bigger happening here. And just as a brief thought of the big takeaway I'm getting in the second book on career belonging, there are three types of belonging. There's belonging to self, belonging to others, and belonging to something bigger than yourself. And so with that in mind, it's like your career can belong to you. No one can take it from you. You own it completely, but you have to know your values. You have to know that your career is not a set of the jobs you have. It's the constellation of experiences you're gathering and what you want to experience in this lifetime in your work. And then your career can belong to others. That's when you're part of a workplace or a part of a company or team. And your career belonging to something bigger than you, I think, is about calling and purpose and mapping to those bigger impacts you want to have in the world. So I've been playing with that a lot. It's high on my mind right now.
I think, though, you hit on something important there, is that you have to first, though, answer the who am I question before you can answer the where do I belong question.
Exactly.
And like, I'm getting almost this mirror of my experience with being online and talking to people about positive disintegration, because once people start to figure out who they are through the disintegration process and they start to be their authentic selves, their next port of call is, well, where do I belong? Where am I kind? How do I find the people that are like me? And like, there's so many people that like are out there trying to find their tribe and their community. But you first have to be yourself in order to find mirroring in people, in order to find people who accept you and where you do fit. And to Chris's story, like, you have to know that that's a thing that you need to express, like your ideas, and I've got drive for continuous improvement or whatever, before you start reaching out. But when you do express that, you will eventually find the person that goes, I like you and your ideas, right? So it's an important step, like, that we all have to go through, whether it's a personal or career thing, to figure out the who am I question. Because in the expression of that, that's when we finally can start to seek belonging, because if we know who we are, we can then finally find the people who are like us.
Said it perfectly. Yes. Yes to all of that.
But yeah, I mean, I'm a disruptor for sure. Like, that is something it's so interesting. Like, that has been a word on my mind this week because Michael brought it up. And it's interesting to me that when he uses it with me, it almost feels like an accusation, or like, you're a pain in the ass. That's what I hear. But I remember saying that to him the first time in 2017. Like, I will never forget, like, writing this message where I'm like, where I was, like, preparing for NAGC that year, and I was really, like, on the I was, like, defending the theory. I mean, I've talked about that before, and, he was like, "Well, you can't be brash. Like, you can't just go in, like, guns blazing or whatever and think that, you're just gonna, like, get people to listen to you." And I remember saying, "I am meant to disrupt. Like, I am a disruptor, and if I was doing it the way you're describing, I wouldn't be asking you for help, would I?" Because that's what I was doing. I was asking him to help me be effective in my work and do it the way that I needed to do it so that I could have positive results. But even still, like, because of who I am and the energy I bring to my work, it can be too much for people, even people who are experts in this stuff and who are gifted themselves. Like, this energy of disrupting scares people. It can be overwhelming for them. And so one thing I've had to learn personally is not how to dial it down, but how to deliver like my words and my ideas in a way that they can be heard. And I'll just be honest and say I can't possibly claim to have figured it out yet, because I, even in this past year, have left a role that I really prized and valued because I didn't feel valued there and couldn't keep doing it. Like, that's another part of my own process and path, is that I'm at a place where I just won't work for people who don't respect and value me anymore. Just won't. Can't. And so to me, that's like bittersweet in some ways, because yes, it's honoring myself and valuing myself, and that feels really good, but I still end up feeling like rejected by people I want to fit in with. I don't know how to reconcile that yet, but
I feel like you just shared my entire human experience in the last few sentences. I feel that very deeply as well, that I've been told I'm a force and I'm intense and I'm condescending and I'm too much. And it's like, how do you reconcile that when that's who you are? And I've tried to like tone it down or temper it, but like to what extent and why do I need to? And am I just with the wrong people, or am I really just so far off the edge that I am out of my mind and I need to like reel myself back? But I think at the end of the day, I wasn't around the right people, and knowing my authentic self and how I need to show up and where I need to show up has been my guiding light. Like going back into like, what am I doing and what do I really need and who am I to find the places where I thrive. And it's a relentless process. I feel like the universe keeps testing me on this one.
Same. Yes, the universe definitely keeps testing me. I just am doing the best I can. That's all I can do. But yeah, you're a force. I've been called a torrent. I'm like, a torrent? That's interesting. But I get it, because I am the kind of person who can overwhelm with words. I easily do that to people. And I guess I'm grateful in middle age to have an understanding. Like, this is who I am. I can be way too much for people. And what that means is that I spend the most time with people who can take me, right? And like, or can deal with me, like Emma, like other people on our board of directors for the Dabrowski Center, which includes my husband. Somehow he's been able to deal with me for the past 24 years, and not just deal with me, but appreciate me. And that, I think, is, if you can find somebody else to be a partner in your journey and support each other, for someone like me, that has been really essential, to have like a voice of reason, somebody who knows me well and who can let me know when I am being too much in grievance. Like, just having somebody who can do that for you is really special. Yeah, I
These
don't know.
three words have been coming up to me a lot, and it has to do with the career belonging. Like I'm trying to find the right way to define it. But career belonging is when you see, know, and value yourself in your work, and you feel seen, known, and valued by others for what you do. And that's the magic recipe I keep coming back to of, do I know how to see myself? Do I know myself? Do I value myself? Like, do I really? Like, I think I do, but do I know when I feel seen? Like, oh, I need to write a list. Like, when do I feel seen in my work? And how am I known in my work? And so some of these are like so conceptual, theoretical, and they're really important questions, I think, to reflect on. And that's why they've been burning in me. I mean, this is what's keeping me up at night. Because then I think once you have that self understanding, again, going back to the self awareness we mentioned time after time, then you can help other people start to reflect it back to you or connect with people who get you the way you want to be understood. And if you're in places where it's not happening and you're feeling that friction and tension, you can see it faster. You can be like, oh, they just don't see, know, and value me. Like there's a disconnect. And then decide how you want to handle that situation. Do you want to stay there? Is this the right work for you? Is it a good project? Like ultimately you decide, but having this baseline of this framework is helping me start to discern where I belong, essentially.
Hearing both of you talk about being disruptors, I used to see myself that way as well, because I'd be like the one who came in and went, I have all these ideas for change. Let's change everything now, which is why I ended up in the project management sphere because, people who can't stop changing things, need to belong somewhere where there's a lot of change going on. The way I see myself has changed in itself. So I now understand about me that the drive for bringing up all these ideas was really to make things better for my team or my department, the people around me, even for myself. We're doing things the dumb, hard way. People are in pain. Let's alleviate the pain. And so now for me, I know that I get just as much value from other forms of help because I can use other things beyond my problem solving, beyond my ideas. So I can spend time with people and I can teach them and I can mentor them. I can get on a call with them and say, okay, what's your issue? Let's work through it together and help people that way as well, which has given me meaning. But it led me to think, do you see cases where people's identity, particularly their career identity, shifts? And maybe that happens in places where they might be doing work on their personal identity. So do you see cases where people have gone from one set of things that they think about themselves to growing into something else?
That's a great question, Emma. If you look at identity studies, they would tell you identity can be fixed and fluid. You kind of have identities that last with you for a lifetime and others that are dynamic and changing. And if you even think back to who you were 10 years ago, you'd be like, oh, yeah, I don't wear those clothes anymore or listen to that music. Like we do evolve so much in our life. It's hard to realize how much we change. With the professional identity and the hybridity, I'm still a little bit like jury's out because I think when you're younger in your career, you're still getting to know yourself and you're sort of testing on a lot of identities. And so you think you know yourself, but I do think there's more room for growth and shifting. But now that I'm in my 40s and I've come up with this term of creative disruptor to name this hybrid professional identity that I believe I've always had, I can trace back the creative disruptor identity through 20 years of work. Like I was a creative disruptor at 21 years old, working in a flower shop and working in like these little jobs and um, nonprofits because I was trying to do things then that were the essence of this identity. I just didn't know what to name it then. And so I do think there's something durable when you come up with the bigger theme of how you really see yourself, that authentic identity, as Chris was saying, that is truly who you are at your core, but you've never had the words to know what to name it because you've tried on all these other words and they're like close, but not quite it. So for me, that's the difference. I have actually a little acronym I call DIVINE. It's finding your divine title for yourself because it has to have a descriptor and an identity word, but it has to have vigor and it has to have intrigue and some novelty and ease of use. And those are kind of the qualities of when you land on the right name for who you are, it activates all of that. So that was kind of a mouthful, but I do think the true professional identity that's you at your core has lasting power, where all the other identities that are kind of in the Venn diagram, those can shift and change. I've seen that happen, but the one at the center stays the same, I think. I also like to think of this like a recipe, that if you were baking a cake and you're always going to use like flour and eggs and sugar and butter, like those are kind of the foundational ingredients. But you might add cinnamon this time or some special orange slices and like change the flavor of the cake. And the name of the cake is always like unique to whatever those ingredients are. So that's a little bit of how I socialize this and help people construct the bigger picture of that.
Makes perfect sense because it aligns with positive disintegration as well. Because you've got your authentic self underneath, right? That's always going to be there, the essence of who you are. But there's a lot of stuff moving around that's going to shift. That's all the stuff that has to disintegrate when you go through positive disintegration. And, maybe you rebuild where you used to be oranges and now you're rebuilding with cinnamon. Right. Perfect sense. And I think perhaps that's how we change identity in a way. It's not just that things are shifting, it's also because the depth of your understanding of self moves. Once you dig down to root causes and the whys behind some of the things, and you've got now different language to express the why you do some of the things, maybe your labels will change because it's just your understanding of self which has deepened. And when you were talking about 20-year-olds and stuff, I'm like, this is what jumps out of me with positive disintegration as well, is that there's two different levels of challenge. For someone in their 20s, they've still got a lot of life ahead of them and a lot of new challenges in front of them that they'll have to go through and will help them grow. And they've yet to collect experiences. Whereas it's like finding out about positive disintegration in your 40s and you say, well, I'm a wealth of experiences now, but that just means I've got so much more shit in my past to unravel, So it's two sort of opposite challenges in that one's like got all this future ahead of them and some of us have got so much past behind us, but it doesn't make the exercise any easy for either.
Emma, you're blowing my mind. I'm just like lost for words the way you illustrated all of that. It really is this idea that we think we know ourselves, but really we just have to go deeper and there's these other layers and then we know the deeper part of ourselves of who we really are. And yeah, that's why I love listening to the two of you, because you just educate me on the richness of positive disintegration. And I didn't know I was applying so much of it kind of just naturally into my research because I didn't have the resources I needed to tie this theory into my dissertation back then. But now I know you do. So now it's making sense.
Look, I don't have anything to offer. All I do is listen to what you say and repeat shit back in a different manner. And that's how we get to where we are.
You're an amazing synthesizer. I mean, you really are. Well, another thing that's on my mind just personally as we're kind of wrapping up is like, I'm trying to think of words to describe what I do that don't include like a degree that I have or, and so lately I've been just thinking about like, what's the simple, like essential things that I do in my work at this point. And I've come down to basically, I'm a guide and a mirror. I provide mirroring for people who are gifted and who are overexcitable, who've been through positive disintegration, who maybe misunderstood themselves deeply before coming to my work. And I'm a guide. I work with people as a consultant. I work with people one-on-one too to help guide them through their disintegrations. Like these are the things I do on multiple levels at this point. And so that's what I'm trying to do, like be simpler in my description of what I do, but in a way that is easier for me to articulate on the fly. And it feels good to finally be at that point where I have some clarity because it's just happening naturally. It's not something that I'm forcing. It's just who I am and what I'm bringing to life at this point. And it feels good to finally get there. And I hope that the people who are listening, if you're not already at that point, that you reach it, because there really is like an ease at this point in my life that I could only dream of even 5 years ago. Honestly, 5 years ago, I was thinking about this week too. 5 years ago at this point, I was feeling really hopeless about what I was doing, where I was going. People were calling the theory pseudoscience. And I just was like, here is something I am so passionate about that this field is trying to just throw in the garbage heap at this point. And I know how valuable it is, but the idea of like the climb ahead of me to doing anything with it was putting me in a place of despair. And so it feels really great to be on the other side of that.
I mean, the potency of words cannot be underestimated. And the somatic experience too. I want to emphasize that. I make my clients say their identity words out loud, because when they say it, they can feel it. It usually takes a few tries. The first and second tries are pretty bad. But by the third try, if they're tapped into themselves, and we kind of do a little bit like of some breath work and just like centering, they can sense if a word is them or not. Like when you said, I'm a guide, it just felt like, yeah, you are. Like I could feel that resonance. And like a couple other, I'll just share some great titles people have come up recently when I've worked with them. This woman who's got the most like systems of systems thinking mind I've ever encountered. She realized she's a galaxy crystallizer. Like she just sees the galaxy of information. She's like beyond a researcher, and she crystallizes it. I was like, okay, you are a galaxy crystallizer. Like we came up with that. Somebody else was a moment architect, and she had just been calling herself a photographer. She's like, I love to do, portraits and photo shoots with people, but she was so much more than that. And she's like this moment architect. Another one was the challenger of the unconventional, or unconventional challenger. So there's always like this core identity word, the challenger, the architect, the crystallizer, and then some kind of descriptor that tends to frame like what kind you are. Like take it one layer further. And that's when it connects, it truly, like, you can see people transform and how they have this awakening about who they are. And then the beauty is when they know that's their name, they can define it. Like, I'm like, tell me what it means to be the galaxy crystallizer. And she's like, oh, well, I take this and this happens. And like this beautiful definition just starts to stream out of her mouth. And then I'm capturing that so we can like remember it and also simplify it so she can use it more repetitively. But people do know who they are in the core. It's just helping them find that perfect word that brings it out of them.
I love that.
Chris, reckon that makes you the magic mirror on the wall, because you both reflect back to people, but also give them guidance and advice. You
I
can
love
speak to
that.
them from your own knowledge, or you can simply reflect them back to themselves.
Wow.
I love it. Yes, mirror, mirror on the wall. Well, that's how people can reach out to me from now on. No, I'm just kidding. Don't really. Yeah, like I knew that this was going to be a great episode, and I'm excited about it. I mean, in adulthood, like it's really hard to separate what you do from who you are, but you can't do what you're meant to do, I don't think, until you do know who you are. And it's not a journey that everyone takes.
That's why I feel like this is a space of people that are more gifted, because they're asking these questions more than the average person. They're having this internal awakening and disintegration, which causes them to search for these answers. It's almost like a crisis if they can't figure it out. That's how it's felt for me. I needed to go through so many hard nights and trials to get this understanding, because it's caused me to be blocked on everything else I'm supposed to do in my life. Like I needed to understand myself first, as Emma keeps saying.
And I'm having one of those hit myself over the head moments, because I've always seen what day job as the thing that you do, like as not part of self, but considering how much time we spend at work doing the thing, like it absolutely is part of ourself. So it is worthwhile spending the time to explore. If we can get a better grasp on who we are from a career perspective and bring that into ourselves rather than pushing it away as it's just a thing that we do, it's got to be enormously helpful.
Yeah, I'm moving away from this. I call it personal blanding. That's not my term. I stole it, but we make ourselves all vanilla when you meet 1,000 people that are, program director and an entrepreneur and a coach. You're like, who are you?
True. Well, thank you so much, Sarabeth. This was so great. I
I had
enjoyed
a
it.
blast. You
Good.
both are such good reflectors back to me. I feel like I gained a lot too.
Awesome.
Mirror, mirror on the wall. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. And thanks to you too, Chris. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. It is always a pleasure.
And thank you,
Thank you.
listeners. We always appreciate you. Continue your path to authenticity through the links in the show notes. Subscribe to our Substack newsletter for stacks of cool things delivered straight to your inbox. Explore the Dabrowski Centre, email us, or join us on social media. And don't forget to show your love by liking, subscribing, grabbing some positive Disintegration merch, or leaving us a rating or review on your podcast platform.